WCLN 1170 Radio and Star Communications Channel 16 proudly present the We Should Know Show, an upbeat, informative look at people, places, and issues facing our community. This education-based analysis of issues will remain positive and informative. Now, here's your host, J.W. Simmons, as we consider closely what we should know.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We Should Know's on there. Thank you for being with us today. My name is J.W. Simmons, your host. We're talking about wildlife in North Carolina, and we're talking to Lieutenant William Matthew Parrish. And William is now, you're the District 2 Lieutenant here in North Carolina, Matthew. And it's interesting because last time we had a conversation, you were a mere sergeant. Now you keep moving up in rank. Yes, Thank you for being with us this morning.
Oh, yeah, no problem. Glad to be here.
And John Henry Harrelson. John Henry, you live in Cumberland County.
Yes, sir.
You graduated, you're undergraduate from North Carolina State University. You also got a master's degree from Louisiana State University. Is that correct?
Yep.
And so you not only have had some traveling going on, but this has been a focal point for your life for some time, working with wildlife and that kind of thing as a biologist. So if we get into diseases and stuff, you'll be able to help us with that.
Yes, sir.
I think, some folks may remember this show last time. We got into quite a few subjects and things that's going on in the wildlife area. And I want to kind of zero in and maybe touch back to some of those things. Oftentimes after about a year, folks tend to maybe need a little refresh. And I'll start with you, Matthew. When I look at what you do on a regular basis and what you have oversight for, what's some of the things that really concern you with making sure people understand when you roll up, they see that uniform or they see that Wildlife Commission patch or what have you? What do you want to go through their mind?
I think everybody, their first perception when they see us is, well, here's the game warden. Something bad may happen. Not necessarily meaning that in a bad term, but they may think first thing you do when you see a policeman pulling in behind you is you're like, oh, I'm about to get a ticket. I'm about to get pulled over. But mainly our job for the most part, like I would say, 90% of our job is just checking people. And so and that's out in the field. And when I say 90%, like most of our dealings with people are not enforcement actions. We're just, hey, how are you today? Just talk to you a minute, see if you've had any luck. Check your license, make sure you're licensed appropriately, make sure you got the equipment that's, whether you're duck hunting, whether you have the proper equipment, dove hunting, whether you have the proper equipment. And if you're deer hunting or bear hunting, and you've harvested an animal, we're going to make sure that the animal's been tagged and all your I's are dotted and your T's are crossed and you're following the law. So that's our main focus. And again, most of the time when we deal with people, there's just a check and we move on with the day. There's no enforcement action taken. So,
and for just to kind of clarify that too, you deal with North Carolina statute as far as wildlife is concerned and regulations as it relates to the Wildlife Commission. So there's policy and there's statutory law that you're there to enforce as well.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And there's also, there's state law that we enforce, but also there are local laws, we call them, and each county, they adopt these different laws. And some can pertain to and it's county by county. But some pertain to just, maybe having written permission on your property. Some pertain to, hunting from the road, whether you can hunt from the road or you can't. And again, all those are county by county. So that law that we enforce, a local law that we enforce in Sampson County may not pertain to Bladen County. So it just depends on county by county basis sometimes also.
So there's a lot of checking and verifying whatever you're doing out there that involves the wildlife kingdom. You may need to make sure you're following proper procedure and regulation.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Again, it really depends, whether you're on a game land, each game land, or state lands that the Wildlife Commission, administers and looks after. There's different rules and regulations for each game land. Some are permit only, some are no permit required. And again, if you're hunting on private land in Sampson County, there may be rules that apply to Sampson County that don't apply to Bladen County. So again, you need to be kind of cognizant and aware of where you're at, and then just kind of we have a regulation guide that's on our website, and it's also available at every licensed agent. And you can even email our agency or send them a request, and they'll mail you one. So we have the reg guides, and they're available. But those reg guides have basically all the fishing rules, hunting rules, and the local laws, and even the game land rules and regs. So we give that out, and it's free of charge. So there are resources out there where you can find, and again, it's free of charge.
And it's suffice it to say is if you look at it from the perspective, you're there to help people, not to attack or enforce. Or you're there more as a helper for folks to understand.
Yes, sir. Yeah, and I've told people many times, like we have a cell phone we're issued to, and our number's published on our website, and probably who knows where else on internet, etc., or Facebook. But I would rather people call me, pick up the phone and call me and ask me a question than I would have to issue a citation or a warning. I would rather do that any day. Absolutely.
So, John Henry, I want to circle over to you because I used the word biologist with your name. So there's got to be something pretty deep here that deals with things that's happening in the kingdom of the wildlife. Last time you were here, we were talking about a disease called a wasting disease, if I'm saying that correctly, with the deer out there. Is that still something that's going on now? And is that an annual thing you have to look at? And let's start with that and then kind of enlighten us on what's going on and what problematic issues you may be facing that you could help us understand.
Yep. Excuse me. So we are still dealing with chronic wasting disease that impact white-tailed deer. And that's something we're going to be dealing with for the long term. It's not something that's just we're gonna eliminate off the landscape rather quickly. It's a long-term issue that we have. We're actually in the middle right now of our mandatory. So whenever this comes out, or whenever you hear this, if it's between November 16th and the 23rd and you hunt in Sampson County or Bladen County or in their surveillance area too, you should be submitting your deer head for disease testing. So this week we're all hunters that harvest deer, we're asking them to either drop off their heads at freezer sites that we have distributed across each county. We have 38 freezers that we're checking. If you go to a taxidermist or a meat processor, more than likely they can pull that sample for you. And we're just, it's a constant surveillance effort is what we're doing. So
does that particular disease cross over to other animals, or is that something kind of isolated just for deer?
It impacts the deer family. We don't see it cross over into like domestic animals, cows, horses, that kind of thing. There are similar diseases that occur in sheep, in cows, and in people, but we have not seen CWD cross over into the human, a person catch CWD from eating or handling meat yet, or handling a diseased deer yet.
Is the things that you look at, do you communicate with other similar folks in other states? Because obviously boundaries, state boundaries, or as Matthew just pointed out, local boundaries, wildlife don't really check in and check out. So you could have a disease maybe in South Carolina, it ends up in North Carolina.
Mm-hmm. So actually, we're the 30th state to find this disease. It started out west in the 1960s. Now there's actually 35 states and 4 provinces in Canada that have found this disease. And what actually made North Carolina really ramp up testing, we've been testing for this disease since 2001. But a couple of years ago, Virginia found it about 28 miles away from North Carolina. And so we started looking in that area in North Carolina in the northwest corner pretty hard. And then we found it there. And that was where we first started our first submission. Now, down here, what impacts us, once we found it up there, of course, we started looking hard everywhere across the state. And then we found the positive in Cumberland County 2 seasons ago. Last season, we found 5 additional positives. So in Cumberland County, so far, we know of 6 deer that have had the disease. And so luckily, they're all pretty concentrated. not in a relatively small area. It's 8 miles north to south, and kind of in a north-south corridor there that we're focusing on, well, at least where we know where the disease is right now. So part of our efforts and why we're asking people to submit deer is so we can see where it's not. It's just as important to know where the disease is not as is to know where it is, so we can have an idea of the spread over time, because this is a disease that's going to spread outward over time. We, of course, want to minimize that as much as we can. Naturally, it's going to spread just because they spread through contact. So nose-to-nose contact, grooming each other, saliva, eating from the same place, scrapes where they communicate through glands, etc. We know they transmit it naturally, but we don't want to transmit it where we take a deer that's sick and then we put it somewhere else, because once it's a mutated protein, which causes this disease. And so once it's there, it's there. It doesn't get killed by fire. You can't wash it away. Plants can uptake it. And it's, we've seen in research where deer that are sick are, eating out of feeders, and they're depositing this protein on the feeder. And then another deer comes by and they literally lick the feeder clean of that protein. I mean, it's microscopic. It's not like they know what they're doing. They're eating out of the same feeder. And so we know that's how it's being transmitted. But there's a lot of unknowns about the disease. We don't know how much they have to be exposed to it, how many times they have to be exposed to it for them to catch it or for them to develop it. And it's a slow developing disease. So it's not like something where I catch it today and tomorrow I'm going to be sick. It's going to be 2 years from now before I start getting sick.
2 years?
Yes, sir.
So that's almost, that's a critical statement, because you could have hundreds of deer out there with that disease, and it's just hadn't shown up either on the, your testing but the deer's fine.
Yep. So our tests show it pretty early. We test a lymph node that's underneath the chin here. And the disease it's a neurological disease. And so it starts more likely in the brain and goes through the spinal column and the endocrine system. And so the lymph nodes are one of the first places it shows up. And so we can see it pretty early. We have not found any sick deer. When I say sick, at least in my district, we have not, all the positives have been deer that were harvested by hunters that are acting healthy when they were harvested.
We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. Ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned. We're talking about wildlife kingdom right here in North Carolina, in particular Eastern North Carolina. We'll be back in a moment.
Computer viruses, malware, and ransomware are out there. They're dangerous, and they can steal your identity and damage your equipment. Star Communications is now offering Protect IQ. The service adds an extra layer of protection to every device connected to your network. Working quietly in the background, Star can help you protect yourself from the inside out with Protect IQ. Call Star today and take advantage of this free service when you sign up for whole home Wi-Fi with Star Communications.
How can your friend save you money? It's easy. Refer a relative, coworker, neighbor, or friend to Star Communications. Friend signs up for high-speed internet service. Friend's new account is confirmed. Friend gives your name to our service representative as the one who referred them to Star. You receive a $30 internet credit. It's just that simple. And even better, receive a $30 internet credit for every referral that results in a new confirmed account. High-speed internet from Star Communications. Refer a friend today.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We Should Know's on there. J.W. Simmons here, your host. We're talking about wildlife, things you need to know about the wildlife area, what to do, what not to do. And some folks that know a lot about that is John Henry Harrelson. He's a biologist with the Wildlife Commission here in North Carolina. And also we got Lieutenant William Parrish, also known as Matthew, right here in Sampson County and District 2, Lieutenant District 2. So I want to thank both of you for being here. We went to break. John Henry, I want to circle back to you right quick and follow up a little bit, because it's a fascinating field that you work in, the way wildlife spreads diseases, the ability to recognize that, and your colleagues' efforts in isolating it and tracking it through the state. One of the things you mentioned as just before we went to break was this idea that by saliva and an animal leaving this particular disease on objects, tree leaf or a feeding area or something, that they can transfer it. Is it good news that it's not airborne?
Oh, that's a real positive thing.
Yeah.
You know, we know how it spreads. We don't know how, when they spread it, I guess, how effective the spread is. I'm not sure I'm saying that right. So like, we know they deposit the disease through their saliva and through their urine, through, in scrapes and on rubs and at bait piles. But more than likely, most of the way it's transmitted is through like grooming each other and brushing against each other in that kind of close contact, which, that happens naturally. But there's a lot of unknowns that we're still trying to figure out, and that we're actively researching and trying to assist other researchers answering questions.
Matthew, I want to circle back to you on this same subject just for a moment. Then I've got some other things I want to get into, but with the folks that do what you do in the enforcement area out there, and I use that word with the understanding that you're there also as an information officer as well, do you think that we are effective as we can be in getting information out? Is there other avenues or other ways that you guys can maybe communicate with people? I know this is going out on radio and TV. And we're extremely excited to do this every year if we can, at least get it out. But is the public being informed, and is that being saturated enough on other media and platforms?
I mean, I think we actually do a good job by doing what we're doing today, sitting down, doing these radio, TV broadcasts. Our Facebook, agency Facebook, social media is very active. They disseminate information. They're constantly sending stuff out on the website. So, I mean, and we have that publication, the regulation guide that we were talking about. So I think our agency does a pretty good job of disseminating the information out the best we can, trying to get it out, through all faucets or all facets, trying to get it out to everyone. I think probably the biggest detriment to information, though, that I see, and I've seen it before. I actually saw it this week where someone called me and they had a question. And then that's another resource also for information, is the officers and the biologists and all agency employees. But I saw it this week where someone called me and they were asking a question, a hunting regulation question. And they finally called me and asked, and we got it straight. But the thing that people rely on is mouth to mouth, or word of mouth, talking to each other. And there's a lot of misinformation spread that way. Just people, A, maybe they don't know, or B, maybe they think they do know and they're just passing on some information that's not totally correct. But I see that quite often where people are like, well, such and such told me that you could do this. And it's like, no, you can do this, or such and such told me I couldn't do that. And I'm like, no, you can do that. I mean, that happens almost every week. Somebody will call me and say, hey, I got a question. So-and-so told me I couldn't do this. I'm like, yeah, you can do that.
They heard that on the Somebody Said So channel.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. So I feel like that's probably the biggest, misinformation, if there is spread, is just by word of mouth. And people maybe they're just not informed. And again, I don't think people do it, try out of ill will. I just think people do it just because they don't know.
And I think that's a perfect lead in, because I wanted to kind of get into some of those things that often folks ask. And one question that's often asked, or that I hear, is, well, I don't have to have hunting license because I'm only going to hunt on my land. Yeah. So therefore I don't have to have hunting license. Help us understand the importance not only of having a hunting license, but even if that's true, and I don't know that it is, I'm just putting it out there, validate or kind of demystify that statement. And if it is true, how it's still important when you're hunting, because of what John Henry talked about, is this whole idea of turning the head into the deer so they can test it. But is that a true statement or
so
what?
There is some truth to that statement. If you are the landholder, as far as the landowner, and you have your spouse and your child that are, or dependents that are up to the age of 18, if who primarily reside at your residence, and you own your own property, your name's on the deed.
Yeah.
If you have that property, you don't have to have a hunting license. You don't have to buy a hunting license. Your spouse doesn't. The children under 18 who reside there primarily don't have to have a hunting license. But there are things that you're still required to do. Even though you don't have to have a hunting license, you have to get your report card. If you were to go buy a hunting license for deer, you're going to get a report card, or bear, or turkey. Those are the three animals that we require mandatory reporting for. But if you were to be on your own land, you still get, it's called a license exempt big game report card, and it should be free of charge, or they may charge you a processing fee of like $2, I think it is now. But you get that report card, and you don't have to have per se a license. You don't have to buy a license, but you still have to call in and report what you kill. There are some other things. If you're the landowner and you're hunting on your property, you don't have to wear an orange hat. Deer season, when gun season comes in, from that point forward, you have to wear an orange hat, whether you're hunting with a bow or whether you're hunting with a muzzle loader or a rifle. But you have to wear an orange hat. But if you're on your own land, then in theory, or technically by the law, you don't have to. But that's always something. I would wear an orange hat whether I was on my own land or I wasn't, because again, you never know who's out there. And there may be somebody trespassing on your land, or it may be a neighbor the next property over. And if you've got an orange hat on, especially this time of year, there's people all in the woods everywhere. You've got that orange hat on, that may prevent you from getting shot, because a lot of times we've had 2 hunting accidents already this year where people have got shot. And luckily a lot of those, one of them was, line of sight, just not looking at the target, not looking to see what was behind the target. And another one was, and everybody had orange on, but I still think it's important to point this out. But another was just kind of like blindly shooting at a deer, and they didn't know what was through the woods behind, and they hit another person. So again, that's why it's a really good idea to wear orange, even if you're not required to.
It's kind of surprising we don't have more hunting accidents than we do. I mean, in a rural area, and folks listening to this, let's face it, a lot of folks looking at this show today or listening to it on the radio is thinking, well, I hear guns all the time. But if you're in Raleigh or Charlotte or somewhere, Durham and places, they still hear guns, but it's a whole different thing. But here, that's kind of accepted. Yeah, that's just a norm. Yeah, it's just a norm. But again, I think for the most part, hunting is actually a pretty safe sport, because really, if you look at it, I mean, we may, if you look at the state as a whole, you say, well, we've had this many accidents this year. Yeah. But really, if you break it down county by county, normally it's, maybe 1 to 2 incidents a year in that county. And some of those incidents could be somebody falling out of a tree stand. So, you've got to look at it. But for the most part, hunting is actually a very safe sport when it's done correctly. And probably if they would go through the hunting class that you guys offer, that's right, that would solve a lot of problems in understanding not only what you do, but what the expectations that you guys have. And that's another resource that the agency provides to people. We teach hunter safety classes. We do them either in person, and now they even have the online option. So it's good to have that, because some people, I mean, you know how the world is now. Everybody's go, go, go. We're really busy. We don't have the time. It seems like we don't have the time to stop and smell the roses per se anymore. But everybody's on the go. And that online option to me is really good, because people can, find time within their schedule. And, they may not be able to devote 2 nights a week, because the in-person class is 6 hours, or it's maybe 1 day or either 2 nights, depending on where it's taught or how it's broke up. But some people just don't have the time to devote to that. 6 hours, carve 6 hours out of the time. They've got so much going on, kids, life, etc. But again, the online option is really good too. And those classes are free of charge. What's the youngest age that a person can be to get in that class?
There's no age. There's no minimum age. But I will say it would be very helpful if, a child that they can read and comprehend, because there is a test.
I call it a common sense rule. You would want what you just said,
being able to read
comprehend and understand.
Because at the end there is an exam, a test to test your knowledge of what you've retained. So
is there a time limit? For example, if you take the class and then 2 or 3 years later you decide, well, I'm going to get my child a gun and we're going to go hunting together, that it's still
kind of like when you take driver's ed, you're you don't have to take driver's ed again. So kind of the same way. Once you take hunter safety, you've got it for life.
We're going to take a break. When we come back, John Henry, I want to kind of circle back to you with some of the biology stuff with agriculture and the wildlife area, because a lot of the wildlife folks, I guess, understand. I know you do, that these animals sometimes feed quite a bit off of the agriculture area that we have, and it can be a crop in the field, or it could be some kind of feeding stand at a farmer's house. So I want to kind of touch on that and see how that works with spreading disease. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back in a moment. We're talking about wildlife here in North Carolina, wildlife where you live, and maybe answer some questions you've had.
At Fisher's, it's not just about fashion. It's about exceptional service. Experience top-notch customer care and find your perfect look. Visit Fisher's today and feel the difference.
Experiencing slow internet? If you have a fast internet package, the problem is most likely your wireless router. With more devices using Wi-Fi, your wireless router may not be able to deliver the speed and coverage you need. We now have the leading solution to enhance your internet experience. Using small devices in a mesh network, these Wi-Fi appliances cover just about any size home, so that all your devices can operate to their fullest potential. Whole home Wi-Fi from Star Communications. Get the most out of your internet connection.
If you run a business, you need sales. To get sales, you need customers. To get customers, you need exposure. Let our team of experts craft and produce the perfect video ad to reach your intended audience while making the most of your advertising dollars. Call 1-800-706-6538 or visit starcom.net to contact our Star Communications production team and get your business moving to the next level.
The average American household has 17 devices connected to the internet. With more and more devices able to get online, you may need to increase your internet speed. Call Star Communications today and let us help you select the package that's right for you.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We're talking about wildlife today. The name of the show is We Should Know. I'm J.W. Simmons, your host. We're talking with Lieutenant Matthew Parrish and John Henry Harrelson, who's the biologist for the Wildlife Commission here in North Carolina. We've talked about a number of things and touched on a number of issues for the first part of the show. We're kind of that last half of the show. I want to try to get back to some things, John Henry, that you were talking about, and some important things that you want to touch on here, which is that transference of disease, the kinds of diseases that you guys are looking at on a statewide level, but particularly in areas, what folks may see that they should report. And you mentioned quite a bit about deer. Mm-hmm. And we know that at least in my neck of the woods, so to speak, there's a lot of deer that ends up being killed on the roadway by vehicles, or at least they damage the vehicle real bad. Sometimes you don't know whether they're dead or not. Is that something folks should also, and who should they notify? And is that something that you would want included into your study to see if that animal has a certain disease?
Yeah. So we actually do test roadkill for CWD. That's something that we are actively out there looking for. We have 5 technicians. We have 5 folks that work with me right now who that's their whole job is collecting as many samples as they can throughout the hunting season. Mm-hmm. Roadkill We haven't found CWD in lots of roadkill. Deer get hit for lots of reasons, lots of times because they're next to the road eating or crossing the highway, or during breeding season, especially right now. We see a lot, deer are more active. And with the time shift, people are on the road earlier, especially in the morning. And on the road later in the evening when it's dark. And so it leads to more vehicle accidents for sure. You mentioned other diseases that we interact with. One of the main ones that we're always on the look for is rabies. That's something that your domestic cat or dog can catch, that wildlife also have. And then also distemper. That's another common disease that we often see wildlife have, that if you vaccinate your cat or dog, that there shouldn't be any issue. So if you follow the recommended vaccinations for your pet, for the most part, there shouldn't be ever any issue with a wildlife zoonotic disease crossing over to them.
So when we talk about the deer and the vehicle accidents, Matthew, is that something that you would want to know about, or some of your associates? If there is an accident, for the most part, I think folks typically will call and report that they've had an accident for insurance purposes. But based on what John Henry was talking about, is it good for you guys to be aware of that as well, so they could be tested?
For our purposes, it's not something, the highway patrol, that's what they're going to investigate. That's who to call if you've had an accident. The only time you would call us if there's been a deer hit on the side of the road would be if it's been hit and it's still alive, and a law enforcement officer. Sometimes mainly it could be a wildlife officer, it could be a deputy or trooper, or police officer, whoever. Somebody's going to come out and dispatch that animal so it doesn't suffer anymore, because there's, other than small fawns, little small deer, there's really nothing that we can do for the deer. We're not going to rehab them. Again, another reason is they're everywhere, but the only other time that you would call us is, say you did hit that deer, or somebody had hit a deer and you wanted to harvest that animal, or you wanted to take that animal and harvest the meat, then you can call us and we'll write you what we call a roadkill permit. And then that way you're able to actually take and harvest the meat. And we actually have that happen this time of year when it's cooler. We have that happen quite a bit. Because again, the meat, if it's been, if somebody's hit a car this time of year, or if a car has hit a deer this time of year, most of the time it's cooler and the meat won't spoil. And the meat's good, so people will take it, especially if it's a deer that's been, freshly hit by a car. They'll take it and then they will harvest the meat, and again, it's not spoiled.
And it's called a roadkill permit.
Yes, sir.
That's a new one. I want to underline that and kind of circle back. So with that said, are there other animals that people would want to harvest the meat from?
Another one that we have now is we're able to do the roadkill permits for bear also. So we actually have that happen too, where if somebody sees a bear that's been hit by a car, they can, call us and we'll give them a roadkill permit for the bear also. And that happens sometimes, not as probably as often as deer.
It's a biologist. Does that concern you at all?
No, I just wanted to follow up on what Matthew said. The roadkill permits are for salvaging the meat, not for taking trophies. So it's not for, like, if you see a bear hit on the side of the highway and you want his claws in his skull, that you think we're going to give you a permit to allow that. That's actually, you can't possess those.
Okay.
If you didn't harvest it. We don't allow people just to chop off the claws and possess those. I did want to circle back to something Matthew said there. He said deer everywhere. And that is a big important point that I want to follow back on, that as hunters and as outdoorsmen, and even people who don't hunt, we want to encourage people to continue to harvest deer, continue to hunt deer, because hunters are how we manage wildlife populations. That's how we keep growth in check across the landscape. So, right now we're seeing a lot of roadkill deer. We've seen an uptick in roadkill bears in Sampson County. Well, that's because there's more bears. So the way we control those is through harvest. And the way, the only way we harvest things is to continue hunting. So we want to encourage folks. Our agency wants to encourage folks to continue shooting deer, to continue shooting bears, to continue hunting, continue the tradition and the culture of it, but that it also serves a real valuable purpose for the rest of our culture, because if we don't shoot deer, we're going to end up hitting them with our cars. We're actually working on a project in northern Durham looking at the interface of how deer move in urban, suburban, and rural areas. And they've kind of like drawn a straight line out and collared deer. And we were looking at causes of death. And when you're in urban and suburban areas, pretty much you get hit by a car if you're a deer. And so hunters play a real valuable role in keeping those deer numbers in check, so we're not having those kinds of issues. That goes for bears as well. So I would encourage folks, not just for roadkill issues, but just for overall, for the health of wildlife, that we should continue harvesting and continue hunting.
Absolutely. Matthew, is there a concern people should have, and we're talking about bear now particularly, is there concern people should have with bear? Because there's this kind of, I guess, movie mentality that a bear's going to get you. And if there's a bear, and as was just pointed out by John Henry, there's bear populating the northern part of Sampson County. Should folks start saying, oh, I better watch before I go out of my house and make sure I got my gun with me, or look and run, get him a car? I mean, let's remove the fear piece here.
Yeah. So, and John Henry, if he has anything to add, I want him to jump in. But again, for the most part, the bear population, across the eastern North Carolina, even Sampson County, the northern part, I think it was last year at some point, a bear got hit just right up the road from my house in northern Sampson County. That's the first time I've ever known of a bear getting hit there. And you're seeing bear in other parts of the county that we've never seen before. So the population is really growing, which is a good thing. But as far, I think people have this stigma about, a bear is going to come bust my back door down and walk in the house. And that's just really that is not the case. Bears are mainly, foraging around. They're really kind of to me, they're an opportunist. And again, John Henry can add some stuff. You see there's a video going around now of a bear going through Gatlinburg, Tennessee. And I mean, he's not harming anybody, not hurting anybody. The only thing he's worried about is getting into the trash can and smelling and going through the coffee cup. And then he goes to the candy store and he tears open a bucket of candy and he's eating the candy.
They love sugar.
Yeah, that's right. So bears are really foragers, and they're going to go around and they're looking, for berries. I know a big thing we have with bears is our own farms is they'll go into like the feed bins and bust the bottoms of the feed bins off, and they're just trying to eat that feed. They're not necessarily looking for meat or anything like that. They're just they're looking for something advantageous, whatever's easiest for them to get. And that could be your dog and cat food that's on your back porch, or it could be the feed for your cattle and et cetera, or your potato pile for your deer.
So bears then, John Henry, are more vegetarians than they are.
They're opportunists. They're going to eat what's the easiest thing available. So if they come across a dead deer, they may eat it. They do occasionally eat fawns. But I want to touch on something Matthew said there. Bears don't really want to interact with people unless food's involved. Yeah. And if you follow, it's called Bearwise. If you follow Bearwise basics, you won't have interactions with bears. And it's like, keep your trash up. Don't leave your trash outside unsecured. Keep your pet food up. If you grill a whole bunch, make sure you clean your grill. Don't throw food scraps out in your backyard. Simple things. Bears are motivated by food. They're lazy. And this time of year, they're packing on pounds, getting ready for later on when it's colder and they go into hibernation. And so this is when we see bear issues. But, I would encourage folks to go on our website, Google Bearwise, North Carolina Bearwise. You can learn all about how to coexist with bears and the basics of how to live with bears around you. Lots of people live with bears and we don't have issues. And pretty much if you follow these rules, you won't have problems with bears.
I think one of the things you just said just strikes me is very important. As long as you do what you're supposed to do as a human, the bear's going to take care of themselves in the other issue. But oftentimes, if a person has a problem where a bear has broken in or got into some things like, say, a farm or something, that they need to notify wildlife, the commission and say, I've had this bear issue. It's just torn up a $12,000 feeder or something of that nature.
We have people call us all the time for that. And we'll give them recommendations of some things that they can do. And a lot of times, if they follow those simple recommendations, it's not anything ground shattering or anything like that. Nothing real technical. Sometimes it's just simple stuff. And if they follow those, recommendations we give them, most of the time they don't have any more problems.
We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, obviously coming on the last part of the show, I want to make sure folks understand we're going to try to hit on some key questions that you guys get a lot and things that you want folks to understand. So maybe don't keep asking the same question and cut off that negative communication. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back in a moment. Stay tuned.
Welcome to Cork and Brew Roseboro, where you can enjoy your favorite coffee, fraps, smoothies, bakery items, sandwiches, and select beer and wines while reconnecting with friends and family. Sit down and enjoy the experience. Come on by and give us a try.
Providing fewer commutes, more backyard offices, and crystal clear meetings. Providing less, you froze up, and more presence in your presentations. Providing a better internet experience. Providing possible.
You're out for an evening on the town. Finally a chance to relax and forget that you left your front door completely unlocked. Fortunately, you just installed a security system from Star Communications. With just your cell phone, you can check on your house, lock it down, light it up, and get back to relaxing.
You forgot to put Buster in his crate.
Unfortunately, we can't help with that. Security and automation from Star Communications. Call today to find out more.
At the Reedy Mark, we take pride in a unique, distinguished customer experience. We specialize in handcrafted cocktails, allocated bourbons, as well as gourmet signature food items exclusive to our menu at the Reedy Mark in Roseboro.
Welcome back, folks. J.W. Simmons here, your host. The name of the show is We Should Know. Talking about wildlife kingdom today here in North Carolina. The two folks that know a lot about that is John Henry Harrelson, a biologist with the Wildlife Commission, and Lieutenant Matthew Parrish, who is a Lieutenant District 2. Yes, I keep using that word lieutenant. I just, want to congratulate you on that promotion.
Appreciate it.
The big thing that we've been discussing is reality versus fantasy versus facts versus disease transmissions. We've covered a lot of stuff. The last part of the show, I want to get in as much as I can those things that you guys face on a regular basis. And John Henry, you've covered quite purposefully a lot of transference kinds of diseases that goes on. But there are other things that deal with anything from trapping to can I shoot at a bear or a deer in a canoe on a river? Is that legal? I mean, anything that you think you need to answer that maybe folks ask you a lot or that they just need to be aware of.
Well, I would say probably the first thing, and we touched on it on break, was the myth of the ever elusive Black Panther. And John Henry can maybe add some stuff to this, but we constantly, I'm sure he probably gets calls too, but we constantly get calls, texts from people. Hey, I got this photo on camera. It's a cat, and it's a big cat. And some people, once you tell them, hey, no, that's actually a bobcat you got on camera. I mean, it's pretty characteristic of a bobcat. There's clues you look at. Yeah, that's a bobcat. No issue. And
bobcats don't have long.
Yeah, that's right. They don't have a long tail. They're going to have a short bobby tail. Bobcat. So, again, we get people send us a couple weeks back. Somebody sent me a text. Hey, look at this cat I got on photo. I'm like, yeah, that's a bobcat. Mm-hmm. And I told them that. Okay, yep, no problems. But now some people will not believe you. They will go to the grave per se, saying, hey, no, that was a panther I had on camera.
And so what you're saying is there is no evidence to indicate there are large panther-like cats anywhere in this area.
Yes, sir. That's correct.
There's no evidence to do that. Notice, John Henry, how I kind of put it. I just want folks to, if all of a sudden somebody hits one with a car this afternoon,
I'd be all about it.
Yeah, we want to come check that out. Yes,
if you hit a panther with the car, or you get a trail cam photo, or you find a kill site, or you find tracks of a panther, please let us know. We would love to document it. We'd love to know that it's there. The closest population of panthers is in South Florida to us. Mm-hmm. That's a long ways to come for a cougar to travel to get here. We know cougars travel long distances from, migrating across the West or making these long distance movements across the West before. So it's not unheard of, but it will be a tan cat. It won't be a black cat. Right. There has been no documentation in the United States of a black cat, a large black cat that's wild, being harvested, being roadkill. There's not any museums. There's not any pictures. There's no written stories, like actual documentation of it. So likely what people are seeing, well, who knows what they're seeing, but I know I've seen a otter that made me think like, ooh, what was that crossing the road? You see a big black dog at night. Panthers are, a small panther, a female, is like 100 to 120 pounds. That's a big animal walking through the woods with shorter legs and a tail just as long as his body. Yeah. So that's a pretty good size animal. And you have a tom that weighs 150, 180, and more than likely it would be a tom that would be here because it's likely going to be a juvenile male or a young male out expanding his territory, decide to go on a walkabout and just didn't stop if it's a wildcat that's showing up here, or wild panther. Yeah. That's showing up here.
So it would be more likely it would be a panther, but not a black.
Yeah, it'd be so the same cat, the tan cougar, panther, mountain lion, they're all the same thing. They just go by different names across the United States, but it would be a tan animal, not a black animal if one showed up.
So when we look at the landscape, then Matthew, when we start thinking about things that we want to know about the Wildlife Commission, one of the things that you pointed out, I think, is important is this idea that you guys are there not only as education people, but to make sure that policy and state law. What are some of the kinds of things that you get oftentimes that folks call you for that you would think that maybe should be common knowledge or common information, and yet somebody will mistaken something and call and say, I want to report so-and-so, or I want these, their dogs are hunting on my property.
That's probably,
I've got a list of stuff here, but I want to try to more get into what you guys are seeing.
That's probably the most common this type of year where we're at in Eastern North Carolina. That's pretty, I would say it's a pretty broad statement for Eastern North Carolina. And we get this time of year is people calling and they're like, there's dogs on my property. There's hunting dogs on my property. Yeah. So, just because a hunting dog per se is on your property, it's not a violation of any, state law that we enforce, or any, to my knowledge. The only time that there would be an issue would be per se if an actual person, if your property was properly posted with signs or purple paint, and if a person actually stepped foot onto your property that was properly marked or posted, or if somebody pulled up to your properly marked property and, actually turn their dogs out into your property. But just because a dog, do you have a dog or cat or anything like that at your house?
Well, probably, but they're not mine.
Yeah, that's my point. That's my point.
They're
exactly.
Always crossing the yard.
That's my point exactly. They have Garmin collars. They can somewhat, to a certain extent, tone the dogs back. But again, it is a dog at the end of the day. And when they turn that dog out, they really kind of have no per se, unless they turn it out purposefully on your land. Say they turn out that dog somewhere that they have permission. When those dogs get on a deer, or not necessarily just a deer, a rabbit, or maybe even a bear, them dogs are going to follow that animal that they're after. So really, who knows? And you can't control the deer, you can't control the rabbit, and you can't control the bear. And those dogs are just doing what they're trained to do. They're following that animal to wherever they're trying to get to.
And that's just part of the rural landscape. I think people have to kind of understand, we got quite a few folks moving in here from city, and I think it's a common thing that's going to continue. But you just have to understand that you now just relocated to a rural area, and there's certain things that are acceptable in rural areas that maybe if you lived in downtown Raleigh in an apartment complex on the 8th floor, that wouldn't be. So you just have to does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. I think that folks need to understand that, hunting occurs here, but trespassing is never the right option.
Mm-hmm.
Just because your dogs are going somewhere else, if the hunter, he should choose the right option, go and try to reach out to somebody. Like he said,
contact the landowner.
Get permission before you go, before you're trespassing, cause an issue. Because, when hunters, I guess we don't want to give a bad name for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And each situation or interaction we have with the public or with someone that's a non-hunter, we're leaving a lasting impact on them, and we want to leave positive impacts, because the majority of people that don't hunt, there's like 5% of the population that hunts. There's like 5% that hate hunting or anti-hunting, and then the rest 90% don't hunt. They don't, and so their interactions and their view on hunting is simply based off of people they know or past interactions. And so we want to maintain that positive relationship with those, with positive mentality. And so hunting can continue, because voters are really what control hunting when you start thinking about it. Because like out west, there's rules right now where you can't mountain lion hunt in California. That's a voter issue.
Mm-hmm.
And so now the government is, having to solve problems that hunters could solve, but they're not allowed to. So because there's a bad misconception about hunting. So we want to maintain that positivity.
And I really believe that a lot of times if people, where they're trying to find a deer that they shot and they're going onto somebody's land, or they're trying to get a dog when they're hunting, I think if people would simply pick up the phone or pull up to somebody's house and simply ask for permission, I think it would go a lot further and a lot better for everybody involved. Just that communication. And, hey, you pull up, I may pull up to your house and say, hey, can I go get that deer that I shot? He ran onto your property. You may say no, and I've got to take your answer. And I've got to go with it. But again, I may pull up and explain what's going on, and you may, go ahead. That's fine. That's not a problem. So again, a lot of it is just cooperating and just talking amongst ourselves.
And just, we're coming up on about 2 minutes here before we close, but just to be clear, it's not a good idea to contain and keep wild animals.
Oh, no, sir. No, wild animals
any condition. No matter whether
they're not pets.
Yeah.
But you do face that oftentimes, right?
Yes, sir. People want to pick up baby squirrels, baby fawns. Oftentimes it's baby animals that they feel like have been abandoned or they want to save. We encourage you to reach out to a rehabber. Oftentimes it's better just to let Mother Nature take its course and to let the animal be a wild animal. There may be a reason why a deer was abandoned. But yeah, you should not be housing any wildlife without a proper permit.
Do not attempt to domesticate a wild animal. Is that?
Yeah, that's correct. Yes, sir.
But you do see that.
Oh, yes, sir.
Yeah.
Probably more than you want to.
Yeah. Well, we see it probably quite often.
Yeah.
We get calls, reports about it quite often, and it might range from a baby rabbit that somebody has, and it could range up all the way to, I think one time we had an alligator.
Yeah, we've had multiple alligators in captivity.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Really?
Raccoons, pet deer, like adult deer that they've had for multiple years in captivity. Often what happens is that animal wants to be wild, and so it's not like it's cuddling and snuggling with you. It ends up, you have an interaction where it bites somebody.
Yeah.
Or it bites you, and then there's a disease risk potential or just human safety risk that's often associated with
basically,
this.
you're taking that animal out of their world and trying to make them be part of your world. I want to thank both of you for being here today. One of the last things I'll leave folks with, try to stay off of that Somebody Said So channel and call one of you guys if they have any questions related to the Wildlife Kingdom. Again, thank you for being with us. This has been a very informative and education piece. Hopefully, we'll try to educate folks again, maybe in a few months and bring the show back. Ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned. We look forward to seeing you next week right here on We Should Know. And as always, when we leave the show, we remind you that we're on Channel 16, Star Communications TV, and WCLN Radio, and may God bless.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of We Should Know with host J.W. Simmons. If you have a question, comment, or suggestion regarding this or any episode, please send your emails to weshouldknowedu@gmail.com. And remember to tune in every Tuesday at 2:30 for another informative episode of We Should Know.